dear friends and colleagues. As you know, in this YouTube channel, we usually touch upon topics that can impact our profession and our own individual professional practice as interpreters. Today is not the exception, although we're going to give it a different focus than what we usually do. Uh, Today we're talking about a topic that might be touchy and it's really applicable to the United States, but I think it would be of interest for all colleagues worldwide because after all of you at some point do or will do business in the United States or with American companies. And also what I am about to describe might be a situation similar to what some of you might be going through in your own nation. Basically, uh, for the last few years, if you are like me and you travel for business, we as American interpreters have endured people, colleagues making fun of us when we travel abroad, and maybe we have sat through jokes about the US government in a Paris cafe, or we have sat there and listened to people asking us just why when we are eating at a Tokyo sushi bar. Well, what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit more than those uncomfortable and awkward situations that we have experienced for a few years now. I'm going to talk about certain issues that could truly impact the way you practice and could put at risk our profession because they impact the market in the United States of America. If you are like I am, chances are that you practice either as an independent contractor or you are associated with three or four other colleagues, and in that case, it's very likely that your health insurance policy is what is called an individual insurance policy. That means that you, just like in my case, are not beneficiary of one of those wholesale policies called group insurance policies that are sold to the big corporations, to the big entities, because we are too small. As you recall, before the Affordable Care Act was enacted some years ago, it was very difficult to get affordable insurance in the United States. You had to spend a lot of money for medical insurance. You had to be very careful to read the small print and make sure that the policy covered what you wanted it to cover. And also, you were always stressed out because due to a costly illness, you could be excluded from coverage at the renewal time because either you had acquired a chronic condition too expensive, or because you had hit your yearly or lifelong expenditure limits under that policy, or maybe because you or one of your colleagues in your business had a pre-existing condition that precluded them from being insured. All that ended with the Affordable Care Act, and that allowed us to move on, factor that in as part of our overhead, and keep doing business. Well, that's a risk, and it could end after the next election. Also, you might recall that 4 years ago or so, when the new government took office, or when this government took office, the government, the administration enacted a ban to all, many people coming from certain Arabic Muslim countries that could not come to the United States. And that had a big impact in our profession because a lot of the events that we interpret for, conferences, business meetings, conventions, negotiations, had to be canceled, postponed, or they were just taken out of the United States and happened in different countries because many of the people attending those events were coming from those nations. And also, during this coronavirus pandemic, we've seen our business drop, not just because of the quarantine and because of the migration to distance interpreting, which is a worldwide event, but also because in the United States now, many people are not allowed to come in. We as American interpreters cannot work in many countries because Americans cannot travel just about anywhere in the world. And also the trust level is not there. So even after this gets settled and the pandemic ends, it's going to take quite a while for people to regain their trust and come back to the United States for this type of events. If the pandemic continues to be mishandled the way it's been handled up until now, putting us as the number one country of cases and having an unbelievable amount of deaths proportional to our population, then that will impact our business as conference interpreters as well. Also, those colleagues who work the judicial interpreting area, let's say in immigration courts, they bring their job curtailed because obviously less people are coming to the United States, which is now a less attractive country to come in. There are many more obstacles or hurdles that people have to overcome to enter the United States, and that makes it very difficult for them to come, and therefore every day there are less and less cases that require interpreting services in the immigration process. In general, in the judiciary, also if you are a court interpreter or a legal interpreter, you see that cases have slowed down because people now, due to the harsh policies of the federal government, are more reluctant to go to the authorities and make their rights count. So we've seen how in places such as family courthouses, civil courthouses, the cases have gone down because people are afraid to go to the government. So that's because of the government's policy, because of the environment that we live in, and that makes it very difficult for us, if you are a court interpreter, to continue to work as a freelance interpreter. And even in the criminal cases, it's changed because the policy of this government is such that now we're even getting less extraditions into the United States, and usually these extraditions in criminal court meant interpreting work for many of our colleagues in the United States. So the court caseload goes down, interpreting cases go down. And that's not all. Also because of the elimination of regulations, because of the government preference for big companies over labor and over the protection of the small independent interpreter, we've seen things eroded, and the tendency is to continue doing this. And if that's the case, then you will see now that legislation is pending or legislation might come into place, how the big lobby from the big corporations, including the multinational agencies, the associations of language companies and all that, will try to cut off another piece of our protections of our rights as independent interpreters. That's not it. Also, on the next election, other situations are very important for you to consider. Many of the colleagues that we work with, or maybe yourselves, will be impacted depending on the outcome of the next presidential and congressional election. As we all know, it's no mystery to anybody, our profession is a women majority. In other words, it seems like, for every 10 times that you work with a female colleague, then you get to work with one male colleague. Well, for our female colleagues, their insurance costs will probably go up if the election goes in a certain way. And also, some of the rights will be tampered with or maybe totally eliminated, such as the right to decide what to do with their own body, and the right to decide when to get pregnant and so on. And even there's a possibility that in vitro fertilization might become illegal depending on the outcome of the next election. So those are very important issues. And also for our friends and colleagues that are members of the LGBTQ community, there's a big chance that depending on who wins the election, the marriage equality rights might be totally expunged, totally banished from the United States. As you recall, at least in the United States in the last few years, we have been so happy to attend so many wedding ceremonies for so many of our friends and colleagues who finally, after decades of loving each other, were able to commit to a relationship through a legally sanctioned marriage. Well, that could end also depending on the outcome of the election. So all these things will make it very difficult to practice our profession in the United States, and for a lot of our colleagues that work in other markets will make it very difficult to be able to come from abroad and work here, or might be difficult for them to do business with American companies. Please think about this, because this is about protecting the profession. I am not telling you ideologically what you should support or not, what you should believe or not. But if we're just strictly limiting our thoughts to our profession, to our personal and professional practice, it is going to be very important to decide who you are going to vote with so that the rules are not changed, so that now in the middle of the pandemic and with the uncertainty that will come afterwards, we don't have to start working about many more moving pieces on things that have already been settled in our country. So whatever you do, I ask you to please reflect on this before you vote, because it's not just your ideology that depends on it, it is also our profession. At least that is my opinion. Thank you very much.